what does the Bible teach about business? That's what we'll uncover together on the Business in His Image podcast. This show explores strategies from the Bible that will help you grow your business, strengthen your walk with Jesus, and help you reach your God-given potential as an entrepreneur. The Bible is filled with practical wisdom to help you live for God while using your gifts. Let's unpack what that means for you and how you can use biblical truths to build a thriving business that honors Christ. Now it's time to dive in. How do you walk in your God-given gifts? Where do you even start? And how do you overcome the self-doubt that tries to creep in along the way? That's what we're going to talk about in this inspiring interview with my friend, fellow copywriter, and published author Rachel Miller. Rachel is an author and speaker who teaches on faith, creativity, and communication. She works with best-selling authors and speakers to help them craft compelling messages, and she's our newest guest right here on Business in His Image. So if you want inspiration and clarity on how you can practically walk in your God-given gifts, make sure you listen to the end. Hey, Rachel, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hey, Joe. Thank you. I've been very excited about our conversation.
Me too. I'm so grateful that God finally just brought it all together after all the back and forth planning. God is so good.
Amen to that. Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have you on today because you are a person, honestly, I'm just so blessed, watching you flourish and what God is doing in your life. And you're a person who's really walking in your gifts. You're really using the gifts that God put inside you to glorify Him, to bless others, and you're just doing some awesome stuff. So I want to talk about that and encourage other people who are kind of in that season of trying to figure out what their gifts are, or if they do know what their gifts are, they're trying to figure out how to use them, what God wants them to do, and building that confidence, overcoming that imposter syndrome. So I'm excited to get into that. But before we get started, can you just share a little bit about what you do, what you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. That's so kind. Thank you for those words of encouragement. So I am a writer. I'm very blessed to be paid to write full time and to be on the side getting my own career as an author going. I have been a writer for over a decade now, but I started out actually as a Spanish teacher. That was my first job. I learned Spanish in college and grad school. I ended up getting a master's degree in Spanish as well. But to be honest, I had very few I didn't have clarity. And like you mentioned just a second ago, confidence. I didn't have confidence about career and about work and calling. I kind of have stumbled into everything I've done in life. And that's really been led by the Lord and His kindness and the Holy Spirit leading me. But I want to speak to those who might be listening who feel like I don't see myself as this really direction filled and confident and I know exactly what I want. And especially as entrepreneurs, sometimes we can get caught up comparing ourselves to other people who feel like they've got it quote unquote figured it out. That has never been the case for me. And I've just been blessed to be able to take new opportunities as they come. So for me, going from education as a teacher, I had been writing freelance on the side for during that whole time really. And then I had a client that it turned into a full-time communications job. And then from there, my focus was copywriting, which led me to Tennessee, where I met you. And you're a writer as well in the organization where we work. And I'm blessed now to be able to do ghostwriting and speech writing, which is in a way, speech writing has kind of come full circle to teaching because I've always loved the in-person interactive element of being in front of a group of people and teaching. I would say, even though I am a writer, the core gifting that God has given me is teaching. I love connecting people with ideas that have the potential to change their lives. So that purpose shows up in everything that I do as a communicator.
I love that. So there's so much to unpack here. One, I love the fact that God has flourished this gift in you, even while you had your full-time job, because you had that teaching job as a Spanish teacher. And, a lot of people, they're kind of in that boat where they're building this dream on the side, but they're also being faithful to an employer where they're working. And just that's such a testament to the fact that it is possible. So what are some things that kind of helped you? And even now, because you still are working full-time as a writer, we work together. But, we're building these other dreams on the side, and God has called us to be faithful in both. So what has helped you through that?
That's such a great question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is the discipline to build the thing, to create the thing that God is calling you to do in addition to your income, right? Your main job. And everybody has to figure out what that looks like. How many hours a week? Getting very practical and tactical about, okay, for me as a writer, I do my best work fresh first thing in the morning. And so
Same.
yeah. So that means when I'm working on a project of my own, that means getting up really early. And that's hard to
How
balance when you
early?
have
How early we talking, Rachel?
I mean, in some seasons, like for me, five,
Okay.
five.
Okay.
Yeah. So because I would try to get to work by 7:30 or 8, which means I have an hour, hour and a half in the morning before work. And then
Yeah.
plus, getting ready and breakfast, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So in the seasons where I was really cranking out a lot of chapters and a lot of word count for my book, it was, up early before work in those ways. And then setting aside times on the weekend and like longer sprints where I would have time to go deep on a project, taking off some PTO to do that. So it's a tough balance, right?
Yeah.
Because many of your listeners, I'm sure, are parents, and we have other, we have health and fitness and community and church and service. So I think there's also you have to have the discernment, like the discipline to build the thing, and the discipline to rest and to
Mm.
practice habits like Sabbath and disconnection and
Yeah.
prayer and trusting the Lord.
Yes.
And because
Yes.
often we can be driven by kind of this time anxiety that we don't even
Mm-hmm.
realize is a motivator for us. So I think checking in with our motives to make sure this is I think no person, and especially creatives, right? No one can do it on our own. So there's a level of discernment of saying, all right, what are the things that I can figure out on my own? I can get on Google, I can do the work, I can build the website, I can do X, Y, Z. And then what are the things where I need to hire somebody? Like I need
Mm-hmm.
help
Yeah.
getting this level of expertise. Me spending X amount of hours is not worth it. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely did. I'm really thankful, as you and I, where we work, we have a ton of network of people, really at any discipline that we could
Yeah.
want, marketing and SEO and paid social, whatever it is, I have been unashamed about getting buying people coffee or lunch. And then if I need to hire them,
Yeah.
paying them, publicity is another one that comes to mind. So,
True.
um, be very intentional, whoever's listening, be very intentional about building relationships in whatever creative space you're in, and kind of picture it as like a little bit of a spider web. If your project is here at the middle, what are all of the little threads that come out of it that you need to
Mm.
be successful in what you're doing? And you can learn some of those, but there are going to be times where you either don't have the time or the skill set or the energy to do all of it. And so setting aside in your budget, or as you're building your business, going slowly little by little, like reinvesting some of that back in
Yeah. That's
to
key.
hire some help. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. That is key for sure. So you're doing all this cool stuff now, but there was a point where you were like trying to figure things out, right? So what was that aha moment for you where God really gave you clarity about what your gifts were and how he wanted you to use them?
Man, I would not be so clear on my gifts if it weren't for the community around
Mm.
me. I know we just talked about the importance of relationships, but man, going back even to days as a kid or in school and having teachers and having parents and leaders and my peers affirming, hey, you're good at this. You're a good writer. You're a good speaker. You're good in front of people. I don't think we can really figure out who we are on our own. We need other people to help understand and affirm those giftings.
Mm.
So I would say I can look back on very early memories and see seeds of those skills being cultivated by people who invested in me, but also affirmed. And then growing up, like I said, I wasn't like this super ambitious career oriented person, but my realization and my identity as a writer has kind of experienced it a little bit more like a sunrise. Like, oh, the light's coming up and the light's coming up, and all of a sudden it's daytime. I'm like, oh yeah, this is who I am. I'm a writer. I will never not write books in
Mm.
some kind of capacity. And so I think that's okay too, to evolve a little bit slowly in your confidence and in your capacity to take on bigger and better projects. Um, there are in my life right now, there's a key community that helps me a lot, and it's my writers group that I meet with twice a month. we started 4 years ago now, and we've been meeting pretty consistently for those past 4 years. And
Mm,
man, the power of having them to work with me, to share resources, to share opportunities for, hey, I heard about this publishing thing, or I heard about, oh,
mm,
let me connect you with my friend. And so that group of women has been absolutely instrumental in not only just providing connections and the resources to keep going, but also the encouragement and hope when it gets really
yeah,
frustrating and hard, because that happens quite
yeah,
a bit.
yeah. So before you had that community, how did you start actively like seeking out the right opportunities to put yourself out there and start growing your skills and your giftings and using them?
Mhm. Man, it's so funny. I look back on a time when I was 17 years old, and I made this little personal commitment to myself on my 17th birthday that I was going to write a note, a handwritten note to somebody in my life. And the note had to be a thank you note or a note of encouragement to that person. And I was going to write it and deliver it that day, whether it was by hand or dropping it in the mail. So I did it for a year. I think I did it actually for 2 years, because I
Every day?
continued it. Yes, every day.
Wow, okay.
There were a couple days I missed. But overall, like, out of the 2 years, I mean, a handful of days that I didn't do it. So it's kind of funny looking back. I didn't know what I was even doing at that point. I just felt like, I honestly felt like it was something that God had placed on my heart, and it was a matter of
Yeah.
obedience to do that. But I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was exercising the discipline of writing even then.
Mm,
And so I just want to tell that little story to say, like, start small, start
yeah.
wherever you are, whatever little like glimmer of curiosity or creativity that you have. How can you help one person today with the skill set that you have, and just keep developing it? And then I've always found in my, by being faithful in the small things, and by showing up at work as a teacher, as a communications director, as a copywriter, I have always experienced more responsibility being given.
Mm,
The reward
yes.
for good work is more work. And so starting small and being faithful in those little things, and then being intentional to seek out people who, I'm in my mid 30s now. And so I think a little bit more, I think differently now about, gosh, who is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ahead of me?
Mm,
How can I be with them? How can I learn from them? How can I ask them to pour into me? And I'm also at the point now, I'm like, wow, I can be thinking about that for the person 10 years behind me who's just getting started. So I think the importance of mentorship and of being
yes.
intentional, not being afraid to ask somebody like, hey, I'm trying to figure out, whatever part of the business it is. Can you teach me? Can I buy you lunch?
Mm,
Or can we meet once a
yeah.
month or once a quarter? So just, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask for what you need, and just be faithful with the small things that you've been given.
Oh, yeah. I think that a lot of times I know I've experienced this where we're trying to plan for perfection and it keeps us from starting, right? Because we're thinking about this perfect outcome that we want, whatever it is. Could be writing a sales page, or it could be recording a podcast, or whatever creative thing. And, in that, we stop ourselves, we delay ourselves more. Whereas if we just focus on starting and doing something to practice without that pressure of feeling like it has to be the best the first time, like the first video or the first interview you do or the first whatever is not going to be the best one, but it's going to get you started, and you'll never get to the best one and if you don't have those first few ones that are not as good. One of the things I like to do, so I watch YouTube a lot. That's like my
Mhm.
form of entertainment.
I love it. It's so good.
Yes, I love to learn and watch vlogs and just like get other perspectives on topics that I'm interested in. And so one of the things that I like to do is I'll go to someone's page that I, really appreciate their content, and I'll look at their first video, and I'll just be so impressed at where they started, where they're at now
Mm,
compared to where they started. And it encourages me because
I
a
love
lot of
that.
times, yeah, like a lot of times we don't get to see that glimpse, right? We don't always get to see where someone started. But when we do, we often see that, it wasn't that great. It was okay, right? And the point is that they started, we start. And I think it's so important to work with God to kind of get over that perfection mentality. I'm kind of a recovering perfectionist.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
a
Yeah.
struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are flooded with examples of work by people at the
Yeah.
top of their game,
Yes,
that have been
absolutely.
doing this
Yeah.
craft for decades and decades. And you're right. I love that practice of where can you go and find the original
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
right? One of the places where I draw a lot of inspiration from is from stand-up comedy.
Mm,
And I love seeing, a quick reel pop up or YouTube, like you mentioned, and seeing like a really old clip of a comedian that I'm like, oh wow, like I see the seeds of how good they are
mhm,
today. Like I
mhm.
see I see their
Yes.
style, or I see their cadence, or I see the material, the type of jokes they do, but it's nothing like the polished,
Exactly. Not as
diamond that we
polished.
get to
Yeah.
enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great practice. You have to be willing to be a little bit foolish, right? To put yourself
To
out
be
there
a
to
beginner. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly to be a beginner in order to become a master. Everybody starts there. It's a myth to believe otherwise, that we're really we just think like, well, this person came out of the womb like as an expert, and that's not true.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I have copywriting students, and I tell them all the time, like people who want to get started in copywriting, like copywriting is a skill that you learn. Nobody is born knowing copywriting. And I think
Mm,
that, like you said, we're exposed to all these experts online and all this stuff. And it makes us feel like we have to go from point A to point Z overnight. But the truth
mm,
is that they started scrappy. They started with their first blog post, their first headline, their first sales page, and it probably wasn't that good. The first thing that you ever write isn't going to be the best, right? And so, transitioning a little bit into your book, because you just
yeah.
published a book recently,
Hmm.
where did the idea come from? Like, how did you know you were supposed to write this book?
Yeah. Wow. I love that question. The key phrase of what this book is about is the tension of living with unmet longing. And
Mm,
that phrase came to me in the summer of 2020 during COVID.
mm,
And I think it's no surprise, it's no accident that in that season of stillness and of canceled plans and of a blank calendar, that a lot of creativity was kind of bubbling inside of me. And I'm sure a lot of creatives probably experienced that. Lots of ideas, businesses, podcasts, things coming out of that season where we had space and margin and breathing room. So that summer, I turned 30. The world was shut down, as we all know. It was a very lonely, a very scary time. And I was very single. And growing up, like I told you earlier, I didn't have career aspirations for my life, but I did have marriage and family aspirations.
mm,
I came from a big family. I had always wanted to be married. In my early 20s, mid 20s, I was ready. I was looking, I was
yeah.
dating. And over a decade of dating, starting in my late teens, over a decade of dating, I turned 30 and I'm like, I'm still, I'm feel further away than ever from finding somebody that I want to spend my life with. And so the book came from a place of pouring out that pain. And like I said, that tension of unmet longing, this longing to be a wife,
Mm,
to find my person, to find my companion. And it felt like that desire had taken on a life of its own almost. And
mm,
I didn't know how to
mm,
manage it well from my faith perspective, from an emotional health perspective. And God really just challenged me through writing to channel all of that frustration and that search of scripture into a book. And it's funny that you asked about like how did you know it was supposed to be a book? I tried to turn it into like blogs and
mm,
devotionals because I had this feeling about like what you were saying earlier. I had this feeling, well, let me just start getting it out there, getting it out there. And I just struggled. I knew, and I haven't had this experience very often, but I knew the medium. I knew it was supposed to be a book. I was
mm,
like, these are coming out as chapters. It's coming out as this unified concept. I don't know how to chop it up and to present it in a different form. And so that was an interesting experience because I felt like, no, this is a book. And I had a prayer and on my back porch that summer, and like June or July, it was hot. I was out there writing and I prayed. I was like, God, I know this is a book and I know you've called me to write it, but I have no clue how to navigate the publishing
mm,
industry. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel totally overwhelmed. And I just remember asking him, I was like, if you want this to come into being, I need you to do it. Like, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to write it. I'm going to make connections. I'm going to
yeah.
search, but I need your help. And he was very kind and faithful. And it took a few years to see that come to fruition. The short version of the story is I joined a writing group online called Compel Training. It's underneath Lisa Turkhurst's leadership. She is a very accomplished Christian author, and it's a great online training resource for anybody who's interested in sharpening their writing skills. So I joined that group, and they had some publishing opportunities, and I submitted my book proposal. I spent a lot of time working on this 50-page book proposal, submitted my idea, and a publisher in Texas called
Wow.
Leafwood picked it up, and they agreed to work with me on it, which was a total gift from God. Total gift from God. It's very hard to get a traditional
Yeah.
publishing deal, and I don't have a big following. So God answered the prayer, right? So that's a brief version of the story, but it took, it came out just 2 months ago, so it's still a new release, and it took almost 4 years, really, from the time I started writing to the time it came out, which was a lesson in patience. And now there are many authors. It
Mm.
takes double that time, triple that time. It could take much longer than that to get their first book out, but I
Mm.
just say that to anybody who's in a season of like, gosh, I've been working at this thing for months or for years. um, we cannot foresee God's timeline that He has for our lives and for these projects. So hang in
Yeah.
there if anybody's getting tired out there.
Oh, yeah. And I know I've gotten tired. Oh my goodness, I've gotten tired. And it's not easy to stay faithful to something when you're not seeing the fruit that you want. And we're bombarded now with social media and all these things where like we're seeing people's outcomes that they worked so hard for
Yeah.
years and years. This was not an overnight thing, but people see that end result and then they compare their beginning to their middle or their end, and then they get discouraged and they don't want to even like keep going. And I think we need to get some tougher skin, some tenacity.
Yes.
We need
Yes.
a backbone,
Yeah.
if we're gonna like see God's promises fulfilled. But during that season, that whole process, because like you said, it wasn't just like you prayed this prayer and the next day you got a publishing deal, right? It was
Right.
like
Yeah.
a process. Um, what steps were you actively taking to kind of seek counsel and at least try to see, what can I learn? Who can I learn from before God brought that opportunity?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I didn't feel like it should be on a website somewhere or in
Yeah.
social content, but I was constantly sharing the idea. And I think that's key.
Mm.
It kind of organically started happening in my conversations with friends and with family, with my writing community, with my church community. And every time I brought this idea up, hey, I'm working on this concept, and I would share it, and especially that phrase, living with unmet longing. And I felt like I just kept hitting people's heart, like
Mm.
touching a nerve. It was resonating. And so I think that was really important. It's like kind of like you're constantly A B testing different lines or different thoughts, or when you share an idea and you're vulnerable and you say, I'm working on this project, I'm working on this idea, I have this dream. It's really neat to see how that opens up a conversation with people where I would say, hey, I'm writing about this concept, which is obviously very tender and very vulnerable, and people would just start telling me stories
Mm.
and saying, wow, me too, I know that feels, and this happened to me, and this is what I'm longing for. So I think throughout those years, just testing the idea out, talking about it more and more, and then starting small. Like I did a handful of different focus groups. I had like a couple sample chapters. I would get a group of women in the room, the type of people I thought would be my ideal audience, and present some of the content to them, ask them questions, have some discussion. Refining the ideas that way was really helpful. I worked, like I said, that book proposal was key, specifically for any writers listening. Like, man, that's a tough thing to put together. You include a few sample chapters, you include a lot of market research. That was a really important piece. I was able to call another writer who's worked with a publisher that I've worked with, and she gave me some awesome insight. So I really benefited from people being generous with me
Mm.
along the journey to say, here's what
Mm.
I did, and let me show you, and let me tell you what worked for me. So yeah, so it was a process of slowly building over time. And going back to what we were saying earlier, I would schedule writing retreats for myself, or writing sprints where I would say, I'm going to do 10,000 words in the next week or two, and really try to get a big chunk of the manuscript written. So yeah, a lot of process, a lot of ideas, but I think that nobody is going to advocate for your idea other than you or the way that you will, right? And so
Absolutely.
you have to believe in it. You have to believe. And that's why I kept coming back to, even though I'm not a very savvy business person, I don't feel drawn to a lot of the demands of marketing and building it. I was like, I know that I know that I know that this idea needs to
Mhm.
be in the world. And I think, and more than that too, that God has asked me to do this. He's called me to
Yes.
do this. So I think really just going back to that core desire, the desire to make something, the desire to contribute to the world, you have to know that that's what you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to find all sorts of excuses to stop along the way.
Yeah, and I think too we have to remember that God's validation is all the validation that we need. You know,
Amen.
it's so easy to feel like you want that validation from someone else, either a mentor, someone who's doing that thing, and it's like we can't wait for that. If God put it in that seed in us, then we should just be faithful. And the example I come back to in the Bible is about Noah. And God called him to build this ark. And we don't know a lot about Noah's life or his background, but maybe he didn't have experience building that kind of thing, right? But God, like, he gave him the instructions and God will show us. And I think the hardest part is just sometimes just starting because, like, you feel like you lack knowledge or you lack connections, but God can give you all those things. But,
Mhm.
like, start scrappy. You know, when I started this podcast, it was over a year ago. The Lord put it on my heart and I prayed about it and I felt like I was really supposed to do it. And I go back and listen to that first episode. I didn't have an intro. My audio didn't sound that great. And but I felt like I just needed to start and just put something out there. And then over
Yes.
time, a few episodes later, I found a better mic and God brought a friend into my life who is an expert in podcasting and she was able to like kind of guide me and give me tips and I joined her course and it's better now. But that first, and it's going to get better. I'm refining my skills. I'm learning from people who are more experienced than I. I just started this a couple of years ago. But I think it's just important to like let that sink in to us that like God's validation is the validation that we need and that dream in his that he put in our heart has a purpose and we need to like let him fulfill that in our lives. So we need to just get started.
I love that. When you first opened our conversation, I thought of the verse in Ephesians 2:10 that we are God's workmanship created
Amen.
in Christ Jesus for good works. And all of us as creatives and entrepreneurs listening, we know how proud you feel when you make
Yes.
something and you're
Amen.
you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have this service, I have this business, I have this book,
Yes.
whatever it is." And God feels that when he looks at us and when we are walking in the works he's prepared for us. I hope, people who are connected and in tune with him and walking by the spirit, that feeling, that sense of peace and of
Mm.
assurance that like I'm doing what I was made to do. And I love that you bring that up because that validation is so much more enduring and so much more important than the Google reviews
Yeah.
or the customer feedback. All of that matters too, but it pales in comparison to what God thinks of us and our obedience to him. So that's such a great point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel really passionate about this topic of using our gifts because I know, like, when I first gave my life to Christ, I really over spiritualized everything. And I can still fall into that sometimes. And I think we all do to an extent where we start to feel like nothing else is important. All that matters is my relationship with God, which to some extent, yes, that's what matters most. And we should not put our focus so much on our gifts and our dreams that we lose sight of that. But in addition, God also wants us to be faithful with the gifts He put inside us. And I love that scripture, the parable of, the talents. And,
Hmm.
that master gave different amounts of talents to different workers. And, the one, he just dug it and put it in the ground because he was afraid he didn't want to lose it. And some people are operating in fear. Sometimes we operate in fear. We don't want to use that little
Yes.
seed that God put in us. We're afraid that how we're going to look, right? We're afraid of failing, afraid of being a beginner, or just being uncomfortable being a beginner
Right.
and
Yep.
learning something new. It is uncomfortable. Starting something new is very uncomfortable. But we do have to get started and just try and trust that, God will refine us. And something that, spoke to me greatly. I was going through a speaking training that you
Oh,
graciously
cool.
lent me.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
totally.
I'm working on my speaking skills. And, I love what they said in the training that, when you're feeling afraid of what people think of you, you're thinking too much about yourself. You have to
Mm,
really lose sight of yourself when you're operating in your gift. Whoever's listening, your gift might not be speaking. That's okay. But whatever that gift is, don't worry about you, because it's about how God wants to use that gift in you to bless other people.
mm.
I say this all the time. Your gift could be the answer to someone's prayer out there. There's people
Amen. That's
that
cool.
I'm learning from who have put out courses and material, and I'm so blessed by it. And it's literally like I remember praying to the Lord and asking God, like, I want to learn from people who share my values, who fear you and have a relationship with you and love you. I want to learn from people like that. I want more resources in business and marketing that align with my love for Christ. And he has been so faithful to bring that to my attention. But if those people had not been obedient to the call and started using their gifts, then I would have been forced to, find some other resources that don't align.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
that's not where my heart was. And so I
Yeah.
just feel so passionate to encourage people, like, explore those gifts God put in you. It's for a reason. Don't feel like it's some secular thing that's separate from your walk with God. Like, God wants to be involved and, like, help you live that out.
Absolutely. And we need followers of Christ who are
Yes.
deeply like in love with
Amen.
him and
Yes.
walking with the spirit to be in every realm of
Yes.
culture. And
Yes.
God is the God of he loves every dimension of the world he created. He loves art, he loves history, he loves landscaping, he loves parenting, like all these
Yes.
industries people find themselves in. We're called to be salt and light right where we are. And like you said, if people didn't walk in obedience to create those things, those resources wouldn't exist in the world. They wouldn't
Yeah.
like we really do have the ability to make an impact. And that's an amazing, it's freeing, it's exciting. We can be doing the exact same thing, building a business from a place of like overflow or from a place of striving to prove something. And I think it's
Yeah.
always so important to check
Yeah.
our motives. Like, am I doing this because I've got something to prove or because God has
Hmm.
given me this beautiful, exciting opportunity to do it? And I think we feel that rub when it's not there, when it's not coming from a place
Hmm.
of joy. That doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. But when you are clear
Yeah.
on your purpose, when you are clear on what God designed you to do in the world, it takes the pressure off of you and it creates, like I think it was C.S. Lewis who said humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
Oh,
You're just not as
100%.
concerned,
Yeah.
you're just not as concerned with what people
Yes.
perceive you to be doing or not doing, right? And because you're like, I know what I'm doing here. I'm very clear
Hmm.
on who God made me to be and what he called me to contribute to the world.
Yeah, I love that, Rachel. And I also want to add to that that we get that clarity by spending time with him. And if
Mm,
we put all of our, like, there's this tension of, like, yes, we need to do the groundwork. Like, even in the book of Daniel, Daniel had to learn the language of the Babylonians. He had to, like, read different books and get, like, that knowledge, right, to do his job. So there's that aspect of seek out counsel, seek mentors, read books, listen to webinars, whatever, resources you can find. But don't get so entrenched in that you forget to seek the Lord and be in the
yes.
word. Because I'll be
Hmm.
honest, like, there's been things that God specifically led me to do that I wouldn't have done if I was just relying on those resources. But that comes from an intimate relationship with Him. So you need to be in your word. You need to be praying. I encourage people to fast as well.
Hmm.
And that's where you're going to get clarity. That's where you're going to hear from God. So if you're stuck in a rut, like, God, I don't know how to use my gifts, I don't know where to start in prayer. That
Mm.
is really the best place that we can start, is prayer in the word. And if you have a relationship with God, He will not deny you. He's going to give you clarity.
Yes,
He's going
yes,
to
he wants to.
guide you and,
Hmm.
give you the answers that you're looking for in His
Hmm.
timing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus was constantly going away to be alone, to pray,
Hmm.
to connect with God. And he would come back from those sessions of prayer and he'd be like, "All right, we're moving out." Or we're staying here. He would know what to do next. And if
Yeah.
if Christ needed that, if God himself needed time to connect, commune with the Trinity, with the Father and the Spirit. Like we need that. Like we need that every single day. Like you're saying, that's such a key practice. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a daily thing, and I think no matter how big our platforms or our businesses or side hustles or whatever God has called us to do, no matter how big that gets, we have to always carve out time for prayer. We can never put that aside and think that, well, we're too busy with responsibilities, because if that piece is not strong, that connection with God, everything else will literally fall apart. It will become pure chaos, and I'm only
Absolutely.
speaking from experience.
Yes. No, totally. Yeah. Well, and I think too, for those listening, like I would encourage you when you have those moments of clarity, because some days your time with the Lord is pretty just, all right, that was great. It was good. I
Yeah.
feel refreshed. I feel good. But you don't always have these
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
lightning bolt experiences. I would say that when you do have those though, and you are very clear on what he's saying to you and how he's
Mhm,
leading you, there's that concept in scripture about setting up an Ebenezer, like a stone of
mhm,
remembrance, and have this, maybe it's a journal, maybe it's a physical thing you do. For me, like I had that Ebenezer moment on that porch, like I told you earlier, when I was first writing the book and it was becoming clear to me it was supposed to be a book. I look back on that moment and it is so like it was an anchor. The times where I would feel doubtful or afraid or whatever, I would go back to it. I was like, no, I can't deny that. I can't deny what he was saying to
mhm.
me right then. And so treat your moments with God as Ebenezer moments. Somehow put a landmark, like put a GPS pin in it and say, I'm going to come back here in the future when I feel discouraged or when I feel distracted. Because those moments do happen and we have to be seeking him out intentionally to have them, but they don't come every single day. Some days we are just
Yeah,
refreshed. Some days we are just realigned. Some days, honestly, we walk away with a stinky attitude and he's still there the next day, right? Waiting for us. So it's his faithfulness. His mercies are new every morning. And
mhm.
there are days where he's a lot more direct with us than others. So
Yeah. Well, this has been lovely, Rachel. Thank you for your time, and just, this conversation has really been a blessing to me. I really grateful that God, brought us together and we were able to do this. Please share where people can find your book and where
yes.
they can connect with you.
Yeah, totally. I've got a copy of it right here so people can see the cover. It's called When It Hurts to Hope, and the subtitle is Honest Conversations About Living with Unmet Longing. And like I said, I wrote starting from a place of singleness for me, but I talk about other types of unmet longing. In fact, I have a whole chapter on career and work dreams that people are living with in that tension.
Mm.
So that's one. I talk about chronic illness, I talk about infertility. And so yeah, I'm online at rachelmillerauthor.com. I'm on Instagram at rachel.s.miller. And yeah, just love to connect with people. My book can be bought anywhere online. And thank you, Joe, for having me. Your sensitivity to God's leading and your leadership is truly a blessing. So thank you so
Glory to
much.
God. Glory to God,
Mhm.
Rachel. And I will make sure to link all of that in the show notes. So
Thank
you can
you.
go visit her, support her. She is just, a ray of sunshine. So follow her, connect with her. All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
Hey, friend, are you looking for actionable ways that you can build a profitable business without compromising your faith? Check out my free 5-day devotional for Christian entrepreneurs. For 5 days, you'll get a daily devotional teaching you specific things you can start doing right now to honor God as you're growing your business. Get it for free at thevirtualmama.com/devo or click the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Business in His Image podcast with me, your host, Joe Harris. If this show has blessed you, please share it with a friend and subscribe so that you can be notified when we release new episodes. My prayer is that God will help you soak up every bit of what you've heard today and help you apply it to your business so that you can see results. I'll see you next time, and may God bless you.